Today's story is from the Singhasan Battisi. It's about a vague prediction about future prosperity which leads Vikramaditya to construct a massive palace and then to give it all away. But while it works out for him, Raja Bhoj doesn't have as much luck as he continues his ascent towards Vikramaditya's throne. Welcome to Stories from India. This is a podcast that will take you on a journey through the rich mythology, folklore, and history of the Indian subcontinent. I am Narad Muni, the celestial storyteller and the original Time Lord. With my ability to travel through space and time, I can bring you fascinating stories from the past, the present, and the future. From the epic tales of the Mahabharata and Ramayana to the folk tales of the Panchatantra, to stories of Akbar Birbal and Tenali Raman, I have a story for every occasion. The purpose of the stories is neither to pass judgment nor to indoctrinate. My goal is only to share these stories with people who may not have heard them before, and to make them more entertaining for those who have. Today, by popular demand, we are back to the Singhasan Battisi. The Singhasan Battisi is a series of 32 stories, all of them centered around Raja Bhoja's attempt to sit on the throne of King Vikramaditya. So far, we have done 4 of these episodes. The first was episode 124, which had the framing narrative, and then we covered some stories in episode 136, 164, and 188. You can find the links to all of these in the show notes and on the site sfipodcast.com. But you don't need to have heard any of them, because I'll do a brief recap of the framing story, and then I'll cover another of the 32 stories. Each of them stands alone. The framing story begins with Raja Bhoj. Bhoj appeared on the scene several centuries after Vikramaditya had passed on. Vikramaditya had been an immensely popular king, and it wasn't just because of the Vikram and Betal stories, which we have also covered before and are linked on the show notes. Vikramaditya was very popular. During Bhoja's time, you could pick up any celebrity magazine, comic book, murder mystery, romance, or even just a philosophical essay. Chances are there would be a reference to Vikramaditya in there. Vikramaditya, or Vik, or Vikram as I shall call him, was a legend, and that spurred public interest in the location of his throne, which had gone missing. There were bounty hunters and archaeologists of the likes of Indiana Jones and Lara Croft who wanted nothing more than to find this throne. They searched with a passion not unlike that of the real historical searches for the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant. Vikramaditya had received this throne as a gift from Indra, who was the king of the Devs and the ruler of Swarg, or heaven. The person who found it was just an ordinary farmer in Bhoja's kingdom. Raja Bhoj observed the farmer's sudden change of behavior when in the vicinity of a particular hill. So Bhoj had this strange, mind-altering hill dug up, and that's where the throne was found. Looking at the throne set off a bunch of new ideas in Bhoja's head. He had been a decent king, but a pretty average one so far. By sitting on Vikramaditya's throne, he might inherit some of its legendary powers and become a famous king himself. Bhoja's people cleaned the throne and prepared it for him. And they built an entire palace around it. Even average kings were pretty rich, so spending all that taxpayer money on a new and unnecessary palace was not really a problem, as we shall also see in today's story. The builders had constructed 32 steps leading up to the throne to match the 32 Apsara idols on its sides. When Bhoj climbed a step, one of the idols flew out of the throne. It hovered in the air near Bhoj and presented him with a challenge. He was welcome to sit on the throne, but only if he honestly felt that he was worthy of it. The idol told him a story and asked him a true-false question at the end. Bhoj needed to provide a sincere reply. That was absolutely necessary. Bhoj answered, and the idol flew away, because Bhoj's answer didn't match Vikramaditya's actions. The throne looked just as pretty with 31 idols instead of 32, so the king didn't worry back then. But then, the same thing happened with the next couple of idols as well. And today, we'll hear the fourth idol story. Apsara number 4 hovered in the air near Bhoj. "Hey, buddy," she said. "So you already know the drill. Let's get straight into the story, shall we?" Bhoj said that yes, he knew the drill. But he was curious where all of the previous Apsaras had gone. "We don't have time for that now," the Apsara replied. "Ask the next Apsara, or just wait for the end." She began her story. King Vikramaditya was holding court. There was the usual long line of people there to meet him. You know, people who wanted handouts, people who wanted him to bless their babies, or just people who wanted him to cut an inaugurative ribbon. Back then, they'd bring a representative ribbon to the king to have him cut it, instead of having him visit the road or bridge or sports arena or whatever it was that he was inaugurating. One person in that queue had a different purpose. He claimed to be a scholar, and he looked the type. And not just an ordinary scholar, he said that he could predict the future. The security folks at the screening gate decided to test him. They asked him if it would rain tomorrow. He said that it might, or it might not. That was good enough for the security folks, so they let him in. Not surprising, considering these were the same security folks who had let through a number of pieces of fruit, all of which contained something shocking inside. The scholar told Vic that he had done a careful study of all the stars in the sky, and he had a very important message for the king. It concerned the well-being of all the citizens in the kingdom. All of the kingdom's citizens would become richer suddenly. A windfall in every home in the kingdom. That was possible. And it was predicted by the faint movement of stars in the sky. All it needed was a tiny initial investment. "Let me guess," Vikram said. "There's a prince in Nigeria who has a lot of money tucked away and is ready to share it with us if we each pay him a tiny transfer fee. "No, Your Majesty," the scholar said. "That one is a scam. Don't send the Nigerian prince any money. They just keep asking for fee after fee, promising it's the last one. This is different. The only investment that is needed here is a new palace." The minister for construction told Vikram that he wasn't so sure about this. They had just finished constructing 2 brand new palaces, and there wasn't really a need for a new one. They'd have to find land, displace some farmers. Was it really going to be worth it? The finance minister chimed in that he was skeptical about everyone getting the same amount of money. He'd much rather prefer to have the money be distributed to the sections of the population that needed it most. However, Vikram's propaganda minister felt that this was a great move. Imagine the many different ways that they could spin this. Vikram was really doing it for the people. Vikram thought that was obvious. He was really doing it for the people. And besides, a movement in the stars had to be a sign from the gods, a sign that he must follow. So he gave the green light to the project. And besides, a new palace wasn't really that big of a deal. Well, it was a big deal, even if Vic didn't think so. Maybe he thought that the farmers toiling in the fields would be thrilled at the prospect of their hard-earned money being taxed to create a palace that they would never be able to see. The palace was constructed with every bit of extravagance. It wasn't like Vikram could sleep in every one of the 50 bedrooms all at once, or that he could dine in all of the 20 dining rooms simultaneously. And maybe having a separate room to store his shoes and another one just to wear them was a bit of an excess. The decorations were incredibly expensive too. It's as if they took every precious gem in the treasury, coated it with gold leaf, and sprinkled it with diamond dust, just for good measure. The finance minister wondered if it wouldn't have been simpler to just give all this money to the people directly. But he didn't say anything. Vikram went to the palace for its inauguration, instead of just cutting the ribbon from the comfort of his current palace. But this departure from protocol was perfectly reasonable, considering this was the palace he was going to move into and run court from. He had just cut the ribbon and was looking admiringly at the marvelous building. That's when a scholar walked up to him. This was a different scholar, but given the timing and nature of his request to the king, some suspicious minds believed him of being in cahoots with the first scholar, because this new scholar asked for the king's help in finding him a new home. The current one, he said, was no larger than a shoebox, and the roof leaked. There wasn't any indoor plumbing either. The king's personal secretary tried to explain that these are things that the scholar ought to have taken into account when buying his property or when he was constructing it. And everyone else in the kingdom was maintaining their own stuff, so why couldn't he? Look at the king, for example. He had guaranteed that his new home was going to be larger than a shoebox, and you could bet the roof was not going to leak. And there were dozens of bathrooms. Vikram heard all this and was appalled. This wasn't the way his secretary was supposed to treat the poor and the needy. So Vic decided to demonstrate the appropriate response by offering his new palace as a gift. The scholar was shocked. He had expected a bag of coins or something, but this was amazing. He'd be richer than everyone else in his handout club, except for that guy who used to live down the street. That guy had received some neighboring kingdom, and he was ruling it now. But this palace alone was probably worth more than that neighboring kingdom. The scholar and his wife moved in immediately. Vic's generosity shocked his cabinet. The minister for propaganda offered to resign. He just could not see a way to put a positive spin on this. And besides, he was disappointed. He had been looking forward to trying the lazy river that was cleverly built inside the palace. He would probably go look for a job somewhere else. Maybe another king, with a lazy river in his palace, was looking for a minister of propaganda. If you think the scholar and his wife slept soundly in their new palace, you'd be wrong. It wasn't that the palace lacked any type of comfort. It also wasn't the excitement of owning such an amazing property that kept them up. They couldn't sleep because of the scare they had in the middle of the night. You see, they were terribly frightened, but they need not have been, because the lights and sounds they heard were from the goddess Lakshmi. She's the goddess of wealth, and we have covered her stories on the show before. Lakshmi appeared in the palace to ask the occupants for a wish, any wish. The scholar, for all his dedication to his life of teaching people about gods and goddesses, didn't recognize divine intervention when it stared him in the face. He thought the palace was haunted. The scholar and his wife hid under the bed covers for the rest of the night, trembling with fright. When morning came, the two of them packed up their bags. They went back to Vikramaditya and expressed that they'd like to return the palace to him. The secretary, who was still bitter, asked them, "Why? Are the silk bedclothes and gold furniture not up to your standards? Or is it that it doesn't have a cricket stadium within its walls?" The scholar replied seriously that that was not it. He genuinely and a little desperately wanted to return the palace because he had realized that this was too much extravagance. As a scholar, he was supposed to live a more modest life. That was the official line the scholar and his wife had agreed to take. If they had said that the palace was haunted, they would lose the palace for sure, but they would be laughed at. Vikram didn't think it was appropriate for him to accept the palace as a gift. Long ago, he had learned a harsh lesson from receiving all these pieces of fruit from a different scholar who secretly wanted to kill him. That was in a different series, the Vikram and Betal stories. Anyway, he couldn't accept the palace as a gift, but hey, he could buy it from the scholar. That seemed like an acceptable solution to all, so that's what they did. The finance minister rolled his eyes. He wondered why they hadn't just given the scholar a little money at the beginning. Vikram moved in that same day. Again, in the middle of the night, Lakshmi appeared. Vikram did recognize the signs. He went right up to where Lakshmi stood and prayed to her. Lakshmi was pleased by this reaction. She had not expected the couple the previous night to be scared out of their wits. Anyway, the reason she was here was the movement of the stars. It turns out that the first scholar had been exactly right, because this palace was constructed in a very specific way and at a very specific time to coincide with the movement of those stars. As a result, Lakshmi had appeared and was ready to grant the occupants a wish. Any wish. Vikram could ask for his treasury to be full of precious stones, or just cool cash and coins. Not digital yet, though. That form of money would have to wait a couple of millennia. Vikram didn't know what digital meant, but he said he didn't want any of the money for himself. All he wanted was for each person in his kingdom to receive some money. Not an equal amount, maybe slightly more for the ones below the poverty line. You see, his finance minister had compiled a spreadsheet, and he could just give that to Lakshmi if that made her work easier. Lakshmi agreed that indeed it would. So Vikram fetched the large sheet of cloth which his finance minister had drawn tables on, showing how much each household needed to receive to make it fair to everyone. That sheet had been spread out in the grand ballroom, hence the name, spreadsheet. It's not that the finance minister had been expecting Lakshmi to visit, it had just been an experiment that now had paid off beautifully. Lakshmi snapped her fingers and the money became available to everyone in the kingdom instantly. She also appreciated Vikram for thinking of his people rather than of himself. At this point, the Apsara concluded her story and asked Raja Bhoj her question. Did Bhoj think that he could have done what Vikram did in that situation? He must answer genuinely, because she had the same AI-based lie detector just like her predecessors. Bhoj confessed that his answer was a no. He couldn't see himself constructing a massive palace on a small whim, even though, as he said this, he stood in a palace that had been constructed just to house Vikramaditya's throne. Bhoj also said that he definitely wouldn't have gifted such a massive investment to any person who asked for a handout. Not to criticize Vikramaditya or anything, but that felt a little rash. Well, there you have it, the Apsara said. She waved bye and flew off. Bhoj shouted after the departing idol. She hadn't answered his question about where they were all going. But it was too late. She was out of earshot. He turned around and looked at the throne again. It was another Apsara short. He sighed and lifted his foot to take the next step. That's where we'll close it this time. Check the links in the show notes and on the site sfipodcast.com for previous Vikram Betal and Singhasan Battisi stories. In the next episode, we'll cover a story from history. It's about the 11th century philosopher and guru, Ramanuj. Thank you all for the comments on social media and on Spotify's Q&A. I can't directly reply to the questions there, but I'll address them here on this show. Hari Prasad, I will be getting to the Ramanuj episode next time. Thank you, Dash, for the kind words. We will get back to the Mahabharata soon, in the next few weeks. Thank you, Arvind, for the feedback as well. If you have any other comments or suggestions, or if there are particular stories that you'd like to hear, please do let me know by leaving a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com or reply to the questions on Spotify's Q&A. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook and X. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. A big thank you to each and every one of you for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.